Right now, I'm at the Charles Darwin Research Station in the Galapagos. I'm near the entrance, and I'm here because my main goal is to nature journal a bunch of the rare and endemic animal species that they have here. The only problem is it can be a really touristy place. It could be super crowded in here. That's why I came early. And I don't know if it's gonna actually end up being a great place for nature journaling.
Stay to the end to see the famous person I tried to teach nature journaling to.
While waiting for a big enough group to show up, you can see that I put in my metadata. It's always good when you have a moment to start getting your nature journal out and actually adding stuff to it.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It turns out that to see the Tortoise Breeding Center, I have to pay $10 and wait to go on a guided tour with a big enough group of tourists. Great.
Some of you probably already know that I'm not a huge fan of guided tours. I think a lot of times guided tours make it hard to nature journal. They just provide a bunch of memorized information that they tell you. And if you ask questions, they don't really understand that you're asking questions from a nature journaling perspective. A lot of times they don't give you enough time to stay at individual places to nature journal the things that you would be interested in. So those are some of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of guided tours.
As I struggle to get my filming equipment and nature journaling equipment set up, our guide immediately goes into a very boring discussion of the differences between native, endemic, and introduced plants. And he's talking really slow with the hope that the Brazilian group that I'm with will better understand his Spanish.
Por ejemplo, aquí tenemos el muyuyo. Se considera una especie nativa.
However, instead of just not nature journaling at all or just being upset about the situation, I go with the flow and I start nature journaling the plants that he's talking about. So I start doing a couple quick drawings here of the plants he's describing. And as typical with one of these tours, once I get into my flow, he decides it's time to move on. This is actually the absolute worst pace for nature journaling. It would be better if we just walked and didn't stop at all, but we'll stop and you never know for how long, and it's never long enough to get much nature journaling done.
All right, so when you're with a tour group that you don't have control over the timing of, sometimes you just have to do quick sketches in your nature journal, or when there's moments when they stop, everybody stops, that's a good chance to get some more nature journaling in.
Sometimes on these types of guided tours, you have to be opportunistic. So when the guide stopped at the interpretive station and started talking about the geology, I decided to use some of the interpretive signs as a basis for more drawings. They had a good photo of one of the terrestrial iguanas, which I knew we weren't going to see on this tour. So I decided to do a small painting of that and also include some quotes of what the guide was saying.
All right, so I'm stuck in this group. I don't know if this is gonna work. It's definitely not a good nature journaling tour. It's hard to predict, but I'll do my best. You have to stay with the group too, so everything's really strict here in the Galapagos. You can see that's my tour group back there. Kind of your typical tour group, but I could just give up and go along with the flow and take a bunch of photos, but I'll try my best.
El líquen son bioindicadores de que el ambiente en este lugar no está contaminado. En Puerto Ayora no podemos ver líquen.
Like many guided nature tours, this tour has a very artificial separation between human and nature. And the only time they mention humans, pretty much, is to talk about Charles Darwin's visit in the 1800s. There's virtually no mention of the modern-day Galapagos, of which there's 30,000 or more living in the Galapagos today, the fisher people, the agriculturalists, or any of the early Ecuadorian settlers. Yo, left behind again. Wait for me. Oh my god. Tortoises. Finally get to draw some tortoises. Yes. Baby tortoises behind barbed wire, but tortoises nonetheless. Let's draw these bad boys and girls. This is the moment I have been waiting for. I have literally been training for 3 years to nature journal Galapagos tortoises in the Galapagos. This is amazing. I'm trying to get as many quick sketches and nature journaling stuff down as I can before the group moves on, because inevitably the group will move on before I'm ready.
Alright, so we literally spent 3 times longer at the spot with the signs than at the spot with the real Galapagos tortoises. So
here we go again, another building where we have to sit down and listen to the guide read a bunch of information from the interpretive signs. Actually, they're pretty well done, but not my favorite form of education.
Alright, so it's getting super busy over here, but here are the actual tortoises, but I think 2 huge ships just unloaded tourists, so starting to be a ton of people, and my guide is kind of moving us quickly, but it looks like here are the adult tortoises. So I'm going to try to get, oh yeah, here we go, here's some of the adults. I'm going to try to get a drawing of adults.
I had my doubts and my complaints about our guide, but at this moment he proved his amazing skill in explaining to the elderly Brazilian ladies what these 2 male 100-year-old tortoises were doing with each other in a very subtle way. So he definitely proved himself as a good naturalist guide in that moment.
Alright, well, you know, there's some things not ideal about this kind of nature journaling situation, but at least I got a drawing of the male on male mounting action, so that was cool.
After the 100-year-old tortoise 69, I got an actual minute and a half of real nature journaling. Watching them extending their necks and formulating some questions was the best nature journaling I got of the adult tortoises all day.
Alright, I wish I could have gotten a little bit more time with the adult tortoises. It was really cool, but you know, if there's a timeline here and our guide's trying to move us along. So this is like the last little informational thing you can see here.
These interpretive signs at the Charles Darwin Research Station are set up sort of like a 3-paragraph essay, and this final one is the conclusion, where they try to get you to act and do something about extinction and the species that remain vulnerable. So the main sort of piece is Lonesome George, and this turtle went extinct, was the last of his species and went extinct in 2012, and they have this taxidermied version of him inside, which was surprisingly impactful. I tried getting a sketch of Lonesome George while we were in this weird air-conditioned dark room, and there's something strange about being in here with this last example of a species, and our guide wanted to take a photo of us. So here's a photo of me with all the Brazilian old ladies and Lonesome George. Back outside, it was hot and humid again, and the trip was almost over. It was at this point that I could actually hear them calling for our guide over the walkie-talkie, trying to tell him that his tour length was completed and coming to an end. But this is where we got to see the reproductive tortoises. These are the ones that they're using as breeders for keeping some of these species alive and replacing some of the species that have been extinguished from their islands.
All right, I think our tour has already gone a little bit over time. They were actually, I could hear them on the radio calling for our tour guide. So there's definitely like a strict time limit on these tours. I think if you have your own special tour group, you could probably spend more time at each location. But if you're traveling and nature journaling by yourself like I am, so you have way less control. I'm not sure I exactly met my objectives for the day. Things definitely didn't turn out the way that I was expecting. I wouldn't say it was an ideal nature journaling outing, but that is how nature can be also. And guided tours, a lot of times you don't have control of the timing, you don't have control of how long you get to spend at each spot, and there can be a lot of distractions and things that you might be afraid of along the way. For example, I'm afraid of nature journaling with a bunch of people watching me and carrying around all the camera gear and talking to the camera and things like that. So I had to confront that. And, you know, those kind of things happen regardless of where you're nature journaling. So those are some of the challenges. You know, it didn't necessarily turn out the way that I was expecting. But if I practice that enough, that helps me not be as fragile. So if you're fragile, that means you require certain conditions to nature journal in. And if you can be a little bit more resilient in your nature journaling, you'll be able to adapt to the conditions, sort of like this guy talks about adaptation. You can adapt to the conditions and make the best of it. So for example, if there's a map, I can do a quick sketch of a map. If we're going to be stuck in a certain spot for a long time, then I can do a drawing based off of one of the signs. You can use the signage, you can use the maps, you can use those stops provided by the guide. So I think I adapted a little bit to those sort of conditions and made the best of it. And I think something that I got out of it is just sort of a little bit more of an appreciation for going around with a tourist group. You know, you saw that I was with a whole group of these cute old Brazilian ladies, and you know, a lot of times I shy away from guided tours. I don't want to be with a group of tourists. I don't want to be identified as a tourist. But on this trip, I realized there's some benefits of that, of being with that guided group. Our tour guide was actually pretty good. So, you know, things worked out along the way. So the first thing I would recommend is I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. So basically we would be looking at something, say like the shell of one of the Galapagos tortoises, and we would say the things that we observe about it, like what we notice about it, and then after that we would just, you know, say a bunch of different questions. We could write them down, or we could just say them out loud. And then after all we say a bunch of questions, then we say things that it reminds us of. And it's really probably the best place for you to start. I highly recommend it. I think you'll like it. It's called I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of. Oh my god. Okay, so we weren't able to see the terrestrial iguanas, which was one of the main things that I wanted to draw. But I just noticed the official tour is over. But check out these marine iguanas right here on the trail.
Finally, this is real nature journaling. Direct, unmediated observation of nature. I can formulate my own questions, follow my own curiosities, and observe things directly. I'm not taking in information or photos or listening to the speech of another person giving me information that's already been digested, packaged, put together with propaganda, and regurgitated to me in a prepared form.
All right, bare minimum, I've got animals at different scale. Sort of zoom in, interaction right here. I've got some metadata, temperature, which I think is relevant to their positions. I asked some questions here about their postures and tried to get the group. Drawing groups of animals is always tricky and is something I'm trying to get better at, but it's important. I also calculated the number of individuals that I can see and asked some questions. Some of you might be thinking, wow, the Charles Darwin Research Station, that seems like a great place for teaching nature journaling. Well, as it turns out, I'm going to be back here tomorrow morning teaching a group of about 25 educators from this center and various other institutions, NGOs, and nonprofits around the Galapagos how to teach nature journaling. So hopefully having the biggest impact by teaching the teachers. And I think that can go a long ways to making the world a better place through nature journaling, which you know is my mission, my vision. And if you also believe that nature journaling can make the world a better place, then check out my Patreon. You can find out about the amazing community there, and for as little as $5 a month, you can support the Nature Journal show and the nature journaling education work that I do. Plus, you get behind the scenes access, cool special stickers, mugs, and patron only parties 4 times a year, plus a traveling journal that gets mailed to your address, and you can fill in nature journal pages and see the nature journal pages of other people in the community. So check it out, and if you can't wait all the way until next week for the next episode of the show, click on one of these playlists here. Bye.